My name's Toby Marshall, and I'm an A-level teacher of every unspeakable and unimaginable and cursed A-level that Gove has ever criticised in his life. So I'm here, perhaps appropriately, to open up this session and this strand. So this session this morning is part of a strand of debates called School Fight. So I'll just say a couple of words about that, just to frame the overall discussion. If you've been following the press, it's interesting that recently there's been a report published by a special advisor to the government, Dominic Cummings, which is very interesting reading and summarises a lot of issues that I think we might want to consider today. He makes 3 points really at the beginning of it, which I think are worth considering in relation to all of the debates that we're having today. He says that society has become very complex. He believes that education isn't functioning, isn't preparing people for that complex society. And he believes that we need fundamental changes in education if education is going to prepare people and the next generation for that complex society. And I think our series of debates today are perfectly suited for us to start that project of considering what we do with education. And we're starting first this morning with arts in schools. Luxury or necessity, and I think it's entirely appropriate that we start with arts as a subject, because I think that's one area where the crisis of education is most keenly felt. Following that, we've got history wars. That's the session, and they're all in this room, so you don't need to go anywhere. Just sit down, relax and participate. Stay here for the whole day, send out for sandwiches. So we're followed by history wars, which again, history is another one of those subjects where the crisis of education is very keenly felt, and there's an intense and fierce debate over what history should be taught in schools. Following that, another area, we're back to the arts. One-to-one tuition in the crisis in music schools, again in this room. And I know a number of you in the audience will be very interested in exploring that issue. And then we work towards the end, we're looking at private education, public harm, again in this room. And I think, again, that we can draw together many of those strands of discussion around the discussion of whether private education is a threat to public education. Following that, and something to act as inspiration to us at the end of the day, we've got the Debating Matters International Final, which will be taking place in this room. And that would be a collection of students from around the world debating topics, just to show to you that perhaps everything isn't all lost after all, because there's always a good set of students coming through. So Alka, thank you for that.
Thank you, Toby. Okay, everybody, welcome to the first of the sessions, Arts in Schools, Luxury or Necessity. Everyone hear me? Yeah, great. I'd like to thank our partners, the Institute of Ideas Education Forum and the Times Educational Supplement, who've helped produce this. Now, as Toby mentioned, the arts in the curriculum has been controversial and in the news ever since Gove introduced the notorious English baccalaureate. However, I think it's doubtful whether a politician's thumbs up or thumbs down can address some of the deeper problems within the art syllabus itself or within wider culture and our understanding of what art is. And I think the fact that this year Grayson Perry is doing the Wreath Lectures is an indication that there's a kind of welcome questioning. It's quite timely, questions about what it is that makes art valuable. Very timely for our session today as to whether art is it a luxury in cash-strapped times, or is art an ethical necessity, a necessity in ethically strapped times? And we're very lucky to have an experienced and knowledgeable panel here to help us address these and other questions. My name's Alka, I'll be chairing. I'm going to introduce the speakers in order of the way they'll be doing their introductions. So, first up, to my far right, we have Wendy Earle, who's Impacts and Knowledge Exchange Manager at Birkbeck University, and she's also convener of the Institute of Ideas, Arts and Society Forum. Then, next to her, next to speak is Emma Ridgway, doing Arts in the Barbican. What a better place to be. And we've also got Barbican's own Emma, who is Curator and Creative Educator here at the Barbican Centre. Then, third to speak is Leslie Cunliffe, who's doing an amazing feat of cramming in 40 years' worth of research in 5 minutes. He's Honorary Research Fellow at Graduate School of Education at the University of Exeter, and his specialism is in art and art education. And then last but by no means least, we're very lucky to have with us today Susan Coles, who's President of the National Society for Education in Art, Design, and she's also an education consultant in arts and creativity. So the format will be, I'm going to ask each speaker to introduce for 5 to 7 minutes. They've all been warned that I'm going to be very strict on timings. Then I'm going to have a brief discussion amongst the panel. You're all to be listening very carefully and critically, because then it's out to you for questions and comments, which I'll take in groups, and then ask the panel to come back and then out again. Hopefully we'll manage to get quite a few rounds in before the end. If there are any people who have the urge to tweet during the session, it's hashtag Battle of Ideas. So, without further ado, I think we'll let the battle begin, or the exploration begin, and we'll start with Wendy. So over to Wendy.
Okay, thanks. I think I'm kind of, I'm the amateur on the panel, and kind of the sign that at the Battle of the Ideas anybody can have an opinion. I've been thinking quite a lot about the arts in a very concentrated way, quite a concentrated way when I have time apart from work, over the last 3 or 4 years, and I have a kind of broad background in the arts. Did art A-level, but I wouldn't call myself a real expert. But I thought what I'd kind of do today is use the opportunity to kind of throw out an opinion which some people might find very provocative. I kind of hope they do. But and then see what happens, because I think these are issues that are very complicated and require quite a lot of tussling through. So I wouldn't want to sort of feel like if I say something outrageous that, you know, I'm trying to close down debate or anything like that. Far from it. So I was given recently for a birthday present this book by Oscar Wilde. It's a book of essays called Starting with the Decay of Lying. And really I recommend it. It's an amazing book. It's a real peer to the arts for art's sake, nothing but the arts. His discussions about the arts refer only to the arts. They don't refer to morality, they don't refer to economy, they don't refer to anything like that, you know, we're used to, you know, being embedded in the discussions about the arts today. And they don't refer to, you know, how they help it, you know, he helps us cope with everyday life, the arts might help us cope with everyday life or anything like that. All he talks about, or the kind of line of argument that he develops in quite a sort of Victorian, I have to say, way, is the idea of the arts being about the human spirit, and the human spirit finding a way of lifting itself above everyday existence. And I think that has to be very much at the root of our discussion of when we talk about arts education. If you think about it, artists have been involved in developing the languages of the arts, and here I'm talking fairly broadly, though my kind of main familiarity is in theatre and art, rather than visual art rather than music. But you know, artists have been involved in developing, you know, these languages of the arts over centuries and millennium, and those languages have given us the capacity to explore and express ideas and feelings and intuitions in a way that the sciences really can't give us. And this is not knocking the sciences, I'm not an arts versus sciences person, but it is about a different area of thinking and experience and expression. And so I think the central function of arts education should really be about teaching these languages. Teaching young people something, introducing them in some way, teaching them in some way, the way these languages allow us to order and express our worlds, our inner worlds, if you like, our experiences that can't quite be nailed down to a sort of scientific analysis or rational thought or empirical evaluation or whatever. And I think that that's something that art education really needs to do. I have a Suzanne Lerner quote, which I might bring up later, but I'll leave it for now. I think the two elements of art education should really be cultural history, looking at how the arts have developed over the ages, the different artist contributions, artist sort of like strands, the steady accretion of knowledge, as I think Leslie talks about. I really recommend his articles, by the way. Leslie talks about in his work, accretion of knowledge, around the techniques and materials and forms of art. And then all the other, in order to sort of like develop that language, you also need to practice it. So I think it's also about developing the skills, some sense of how you use those languages, you know, whether it's musical or verbal or visual, in a creative way. And I think that that's developing that kind of familiarity is an important part of what art education should be. And I think there's a lot of talk these days about the arts for everyone, you know, arts and democracy and that kind of things, democratising the arts, and everyone should participate in the arts. But I actually don't think we can really talk seriously about that unless we take arts education seriously. And I think arts education is a necessity in a world where art exists. Art is such an important part of our lives. And it gives, mainly because it gives people real access to the possibilities that art offers us. It's not about sort of just dipping in and out, but it's about sort of really getting a sense. I think in schools, you know, you want to kind of begin to give young people a sense of how the arts can help them transcend their daily lives. I don't think it's about dealing with daily life. I think it's about helping them to transcend the kind of, you know, what you have to do to get through life. And art is something more than that, but is no less important for that. And I think we need to create a kind of capacity in the arts, and I think this is really where the arts is falling down, create a capacity in the arts for critical judgment, for appreciation and criticising and judging the arts for what they are. Oh dear. Okay. So I think that there's a real kind of poorly state, the arts is in a fairly poorly state, and it does, as Toby's just said, reflects the crisis of education. I think it's you know, based on a real sense of low horizons, what we expect kids to, you know, what we expect to do in education is really just to give kids the tools to survive in modern society, to feel better, to do better, that kind of thing. And it's kind of, arts have become subsumed under kind of other agendas, whether they're moral agendas, vocational agendas, economic agendas, therapeutic agendas, and to other subjects in schools. And I think the new policy in cultural education, just to throw this, the latest stuff in, the new policy in cultural education, is, you know, very much around, you know, at best it's about dipping into the arts, and at worst it's sort of getting into, you know, I think it sort of, you know, promises spurious social benefits. I'll leave it at that because obviously my time is up, but come back later maybe some of the other points. But I think that the main thing about art education, the reason why it's essential is because we need a judgmental society. We need a society which is prepared to judge the arts in order to create an environment where the arts can thrive. And I think if we're not, if we just go to an art gallery or an art experience and say, oh yeah, that was great, it's not really giving artists much to feed off. And that's why I think arts are important. Art education is important.
Thank you, Wendy. Okay, next up is Emma.
Hello. I'm really mad about art. I'm having since I was about 15. I think like lots of people who get into arts, it hits quite young because it hits when you're interested in things and engaged in ideas and you're exploring the world for yourself and learning to think for yourself. Really, really taking hold of that. And so I really believe that good teaching in art in schools isn't just sort of a necessity, it's actually really, really vital. Because arts are vital because they communicate the sort of the greatest joys and the most profound horrors of what human experience is. And that has been their function for millennia. That's what they do, that's what they're amazing at. We might not be brilliant at saying exactly how that works, because the way the arts articulate that is in a way that's very intuitive and a way that people understand things. So you could go right back to looking at sort of tens of thousands of years back where there's cave paintings, or look at drama or stories or images. Fundamentally, this is how humans have communicated their experience of what it is to be alive for absolutely decades, centuries, millennia. So the idea that that is unimportant or of low value in educational terms is a bit sort of like taking breathing as an example and just sort of saying that oxygen is slightly overrated in the breathing bit, because you're so focused on trying to get the skills up in other areas that you fundamentally overlook some of the most core aspects of how humans have chosen to educate themselves when they're in sort of smaller communities and also larger communities over time. And the key purpose for articulating and exchanging kind of through stories and images and dramas and dances is to learn from each other. So you can kind of learn from each other's experience, or some aspects is to propagandise about ideas for things. But all the time it holds a very intuitive way of understanding the world and communicating between each other so that we can learn from each other. And there's a big part of that that's very much kind of passionate. When you look at art, you are incredibly involved. You bring your whole subject to it. You're overtaken by it, or you don't like it, but either way, you have a very visceral reaction to it. And where education comes in and plays a part is being able to teach, as things have got more rational, for example, over the last couple of centuries, we've understood reasoning more. Aesthetic judgment is a method that's become very skilled at differentiating between these kind of very intensive experiences and what we can learn and draw out from those. So there's a big responsibility falls to schools, to my mind, to educate people in how to think through those ideas when they're engaging with things aesthetically, as well as teaching them the skills around those areas. There's reasons probably why people do communicate through the arts very intuitively and strongly and naturally. There's aspects of empathy when you're truly engaging with other people's perspectives and modes of experience. It helps with the kind of intuitive build-up of experience that you don't have to go through yourself, but you can learn and engage from other people. And as it's expanded over time in terms of, and space, the amount of arts we encounter, the amount of visual culture we encounter, it also means you have to have a greater capacity and interest for cultural context, for historical specificity, and things that in a more kind of homely, local way, when you're making work or you're engaging with arts which is much more local, you don't have to do all that work. That's the kind of, there's many shorthands for that when you're within a culture. So I would argue that schools are a place where you can train people to think in these ways, essentially, to really gain and understand how to find their way through this very strong component of life that doesn't go away, it persists hugely. If you think about the proliferation of things online, people talk about sort of a digital generation being incredibly digitally literate. And now there's teaching of coding in schools, essentially, to try and keep up with this digital generation who are completely born into a different way of engaging with things via the internet in different ways. But as that's proliferated huge amounts of culture and huge amounts of images, it seems that there's a greater need, to my mind, for actually training people to be visually literate so they can discern and understand what images they're creating and what images and what stories and what narratives through the arts and entertainment is being told, so they can discriminate between those things. Because otherwise you're just biasing things far too one way or the other, or you're having the situation where people can't discern the kind of core purpose behind something, nor play around. There's a lot of exploration and playing around with ideas that happens in the art when you're reflecting on it. Galleries are brilliant places for reflecting and thinking about your own thinking, reflecting on purpose, and having space and time to think and understand things. And classrooms are an amazing place to build up skills, to really work things through in a discursive way. And those two places are very strong natural allies, to my mind, and could be far more so if you had visual literacy and arts education, a far more core way of thinking about how humans naturally educate each other and bring that back into formal education as a more formal core part of it. There's some quite strong arguments being made around the neurosciences, around the importance of building on intuition and some other ideas, and the arts playing into that much more strongly than was understood before. Ian McGilchrist quotes a quote from Albert Einstein, which very simply states an understanding of what's now being discovered about the mind currently, which is the intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind a faithful servant. We have created a society that honours the servant but has forgotten the gift, with the slanting towards certain reasoning. So good teaching in arts is not just necessary, it's vital, and we should recognise it and should be more ambitious with it, and probably have it as compulsory.
Thank you very much, Emma, and well within your time limit as well. Thank you.
Let me second that one, isn't it?
No, it doesn't. It means the audience will have more.
Mine's going to be a bit of a white knuckle ride. I'm going to read it, and because I've got quite a bit of content, I'm going to be reading quite fast. Okay, so hang in there. Okay, right. My talk focuses on how different creative grammars reflect the complexity of persons and can shape their future flourishing. And if you want clarification on some of the concepts I'm using, please ask during the discussion. Given that the arts aren't generic, use different skill sets, manifest varieties of material consciousness, I will concentrate on my specialist area of art education. Firstly, contrasting luxury with necessity fails to do justice to the excluded middle. The claim that art is a necessary subject is frequently asserted without reference to the range of cognitive processes, forms of knowledge, pedagogy, complexity of curricula that current art education often overlooks, which means that impoverished, hopeless art education always meets the criterion of necessity. Therefore, art's necessary status needs further qualification. Secondly, conceptualizing art as a luxury feeds off a false contrast with the necessity of, say, instruction in science. Maslow made this mistake when contrasting deliberate learning used in science with the intuitive approach he thought underpinned art. Maslow failed to grasp that throughout history, adult practice of art have involved both instruction and intuition, just like science does today. Wittgenstein thought associating the arts with luxury was symptomatic of a sick culture. People nowadays think that scientists are there to instruct them, poets, musicians, etc., to give them pleasure. The idea that these have something to teach them, that does not occur to them. But what exactly can the arts, or in my case, visual art, teach people in the 21st century? To sketch an answer, I will use three analogies between persons, art, and art education. Art education as persons only capable of subversive dreaming, an early modern analogy. Art education as persons only capable of subversive joking, a late and postmodern analogy. And art education as complex persons capable of formulating and executing a sustainable life plan, a more universal analogy. The analogy is linked with the capacity of three creative grammars: creativity by accretion, creativity by omission, and nihilistic creativity. Art education as subversive dreamers has its roots in Romanticism. Creativity is an inward process. The outsider who critiques the technological understanding of being. Think of William Blake. Further developed in early modernism, art is capable of creating esoteric serial epiphanies. This authenticity facilitated by the will to regress, primitivism. In art education, authenticity is a natural self-expression which floats free from instruction, assessment, and 99% of the world's adult art not predicated on self-expression. Creative grammar linked to this analogy. In sophisticated adult practices, the grammar of accretion provides the organizational depth to make voluntary omission possible, which the creativity of forward-leaning stance. Picasso is a good example. He had the greatest accretions of skillful knowledge and most sophisticated material consciousness of any modern artist. In art education, Hobson's choice, given the students have few accretions of skillful knowledge, which limits them to involuntary omission. This cashes out as a vertical stance of arrested development. Caveat: this analogy conflates the unconscious competence of adults who can choose to regress with the unconscious and conscious incompetence of young people who can't exercise that choice. Summary: the dream analogy for art education creates autistic rather than artistic persons. As dreams cannot be taught or assessed, this makes art education an unnecessary luxury. Second analogy: art education as subversive, ironic jokers. Has roots in Dada, artistic joker who uses nihilistic irony to subvert the predominance of the technological understanding of being and to destroy the idol of art with a capital A. Is recovered in latent postmodernity, which makes an idol out of not having an idol. The absence of an idol is worshipped in the form of striking an attitude in which the ironic joker manipulates surface formulae to communicate puerile subversion, the ambition of a footnote. In art educations, persons are understood as socio-cultural artifacts only capable of making one-liner works, which, like the pub bore, repeat the same joke ad nauseum. Creative grammar linked to this analogy: adult practices, free-floating nihilistic grammar lacking organisational depth. In art education, a levelled nihilistic grammar of pastiche, the surface illusion of accretion, as in scrapbooks, not sketchbooks. Caveats. This analogy for art education mismatches 99.9% of multicultural historical practice of art, which aren't based on ironic jokes, or executed with little skillful knowledge. Fails to grasp that the conceptual element in art has always been present, but condensed with complex skillful knowledge, as in, say, Botticelli's Primavera. Summary: nurtures persons on the capable of negative virtue, the preference for the absence of something. A negative virtue never builds a world, it only subverts existing worlds. The knowledge needed for subversive joking can be acquired by attending a couple of lectures on Dada, which does indeed make art education a necessary luxury. Third analogy: art education as persons capable of formulating and executing a sustainable life plan. Relates to most practice of art based on accretion, supported by research into expertise and the new systemic paradigm for creativity. Involves two forms of knowledge, knowing how and knowing that, with the know-how concentrated on acquiring orthographic skills, the know that for distinguishing first-person from third-person understanding of art. Underlines the importance of marginal practices for renewing culture, changing ways of living, sustaining future flourishing. In art education, a curriculum with understanding at its core, one that selectively explores meaningful differences in art throughout history and cultures. In creative grammar, used to this analogy, in both adult and art education practices, accretion and omission, that is voluntary learned and used, a creative grammar with the organisational depth to sustain future flourishing. I've just got another bit, can I do it? Thanks. Caveats. Requires teachers with excellent subject knowledge who can integrate but not conflate two forms of knowledge. Flies in the face of the short-term thinking that underpins our economic, social and cultural practices. Summary: aims to develop knowledgeable, skillful, socio-cultural persons capable of adopting a forward-leaning stance for practising deep ecology. This analogy provides art education with the necessary and sufficient conditions for inclusion in the curriculum, given that it can be rigorously and deliberately taught, learned and assessed.
Okay, well done. Well done. Okay, Susan, over to you.
Just get my slides in. You'll be pleased to know they last exactly 7 minutes. Okay. Hold on a second, go back to the beginning. I don't know if anybody here saw the Ice Age art show at the British Museum last summer, but it was the most amazing, engaging, remarkable show. How can you not be astonished, really, at the fact that human beings were making music by carving a flute out of an animal bone and carving artefacts and art forms up to 40,000 years ago? And that really is what people have been saying today. The arts are part of us as they're part of our history. And I actually think that's a really humbling thought, because people were communicating through art thousands of years before they developed spoken and written language, and art is eternal. And we all know that the arts are fundamental to our actual humanity, because we're humans and we're not robots. Art inspires us, art ennobles us, it fosters creativity, it helps us to express our values and our beliefs. It helps us to build important bridges between cultures, and what a language it is if you think about it, because all people can speak it. It cuts across race, across culture, across social, across educational, and across economic barriers. Now, the educational system in this country is undergoing what we would call a rapid change, as it hurtles towards a system which is untried and unpopular, and which has created a hierarchy of subjects where the arts are at the very bottom. And despite what people think, the English baccalaureate still exists, and it still excludes the arts. And I know why the arts are important in schools, and I know why visual art, craft and design education is important in particular, because it empowers our children to develop their own view of the world and to show and to share that view. It allows them to express their opinions, their emotions, to make statements and to wonder. It encourages children to be curious. I actually think everybody should be curious, because there wouldn't have been a story in Alice in Wonderland if she hadn't been curious. This is a brave and very new world that we are living in today and tomorrow. Elliot Eisner sees the education and the arts today as preparing children for a contemporary society where they would be able to make judgments in the absence of rule, so they can cope with ambiguity, frame solutions to the problems we face. So really in education, it's not just the what, it's the why. And the absence of rule is a welcome antidote to what's happening in our schools. Because I would like to say, what is the point of going to school in 2013 It's becoming a factory that processes workers to feed into what is an extensive capitalist system. I see children sitting in classrooms according to the level they're on. I don't hear names being called anymore. I hear target group 1 or target group 2. I sit through meetings where the word child is rarely mentioned because they're talking about goals, targets and testing. Thank the Lord for educating Yorkshire. The coalition government and its Ofsted arm are obsessed with statistics and league tables, and it's all about outcomes in education and the ability to predict them. It's about memorising facts by rote. It's about testing and levelling, about right or wrong answers and being judged accordingly. Rigour, 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 to quote Michael Gove. But nowhere at this point in time of a new national curriculum, proposed changes to GCSEs, is it about actually applying that knowledge creatively? As W.B. Yeats said, education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire. So come on, baby, light my fire, because it's not just about the arts allowing children to be themselves and owning their own learning. It's about thriving and not just surviving the digital age. As Emma said, we need to teach digital and visual literacy as an absolute priority, because children are in a world where they see hundreds of images every day. And how are we going to teach them to navigate and evaluate them, to use them to communicate? Because that's a hugely transferable skill, you know, for education and life. And because art will help them to become viewers, consumers and critics of visual information. It will allow them to create and design meaningful visual information themselves in expressive and innovative ways. Art in schools does something else too. It protects our own psyche. It makes us all individual. It gives life multiple meanings. It gives intrinsic pleasure, and it allows the F word to come back into education. Fun. F-U-N. The Cultural Learning Alliance data survey recently looked into the outcomes of having an active engagement in the arts. It was found that participation in subjects like drama, art and music have a profound effect on students' application in the wider curriculum. And if we don't win with those arguments, what about the creative industries? Britain's second biggest earner, whether it's graphic design or the games industry. Grand Theft Auto being the biggest selling computer game of all time in the first 3 days of its release. Where are we going to have the Johnny Ives, the Stella McCartneys, the Nick Parks, the Sam Taylor Woods? Where are they going to come from if we're not teaching it in schools? They're probably going to come from China, where at least they've recognised the need to increase the teaching of art and creativity. You see, I don't think we need to justify the arts in schools, because I talk to kids in schools every day of the week. I talk to them and I listen to them. And most of those kids, they like to do all of these things. They like to sing, they like to dance, they like to move, they like to wriggle, they like to make and listen to music, they like to create and act out stories, they like to draw and paint and fold and crease and twist and sew and thread and touch and feel and weave and plait and mould and form and invent and create an outcome which they never knew existed and which might never exist again. Creativity, originality, magic.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Can we thank our speakers? Okay, folks, there's absolutely tons on the table there. We've got intuition, language as art, the aesthetic engagement. We've got art as being able to inculcate empathy, art as visual literacy. We're kind of recurrent thing is the role of intuition versus reason, or instruction and intuition, their relationship. What can it teach us? The lovely 3 personhoods that Leslie was talking about. Are we talking about subversive dreamers? Are we talking about ironic jokers, or purposeful individuals?
Forward-thinking people.
Forward-thinking people. Loads there. Does art transcend barriers, or does it not? Does it need to be rooted in personal experience, or can it transcend personal experience? And what does it prepare us for? So I'll shut up now, and I'm going to ask our panel, we'll go back to the original order, for quick comments. They can comment on each other or anything else that they wish to. Do that briefly for about maybe 10 minutes, and then out to the audience. So,
Okay, yes. I mean, it's interesting. I think art is such a different subject to discuss. And at one level, there's a lot of agreement on the panel about the sort of, the way art provides that the means of expression, it's expressing intuitions, emotions, and the intangible, and so forth. But I think one of the questions that comes up for me is, what do we think art is? How do we define it? Because I went to the Ice Age exhibition as well, and I was slightly horrified by it. I thought the collection of work was absolutely amazing, fantastic, and it does show, that how, the human species is sort of creative, to its core, back to its earliest history. But I didn't think it told us anything about art. And I think one of the things I learned from it was how much, I found the curatorial element of it really repelling, in the sense that she was sort of like implying at some level that what we do today, what Michelangelo did, what Leonardo da Vinci did, what sort of Picasso has done, what Rothko's done, all of these, that somehow that is essentially the same as what cave painters did and stone carvers. And actually I think that art is a very modern invention. It's sort of come, since probably the consciousness of creating works that are art, as opposed to something that you use for religious purposes or mystical purposes or that kind of thing. That kind of consciousness it really has only emerged in the probably, last 500 years or so. And the achievements that have come out of that are very particular, because it's been part of a very conscious process of building up this language of expression in all its complexities. So I think that is what I think art education has to be about, not about the natural creativity of human beings, because I think, we're going to be creative whether we have art education or not. That's not why we need art education. We need art education in order to know exactly how we've got to where we are in terms of the arts that are around us.
Okay, thank you. That's quite a controversial point there. You might want to ponder on that a bit there. It's not about natural creativity. Emma?
I agree with the point. I think people are creative. I think that's what makes people, whether they're engineers or mathematicians or any aspect like that. I think the arts does have a different function. I think it is one of communicating the experience of being a subjective person within the world, and I think that tells a lot of things. I actually really enjoy the exhibitions. There's quite a few around at the moment. The Venice Biennial main exhibition, the Curiosity Show that was at Margate Contemporary, Turner Contemporary and Margate as well, are shows that bring together lots of different aspects of visual culture, and it might be scientific objects that are of interest visually, or it might be artists' work. And what I really enjoyed about those shows was, apart from the fact they were endlessly fascinating about what humans create, if you were going to you have art, but you have an expanded definition of what visual culture is. I thought that was really compelling, was how easy it was to jump between different registers of kind of learning and drawing out insights about different disciplines and different ideas from things being in an exhibition all together, because exhibitions are good for giving you the space to kind of think and understand things. I think there's a huge amount of room for complexity and kind of pluralism, essentially, in terms of what we count as art and where the boundaries exactly lie and where they don't lie. I think actually some of the institutions that we've created around the arts are valuable for creating experiences that enable you to reflect in certain ways and engage with things. So I think because art is always born of its time and massively, massively influenced by that. So as you talked about with the moving through time, Wendy, there's, you move into the commissioning of portraiture, how things get commissioned is hugely politicised and economical. Who gets to be an artist is really one big issue, and a reason why it's core to have arts as important things within schools, because otherwise it will always stay something that only a few people gain access to. So I'm kind of pro the complexity of it, but perhaps because I've had far too much art education, so I'm pretty relaxed about that kind of pluralistic, complex and uncertain times, because when they have done some research into what arts education does give people when it isn't skills-based, there was a longitudinal study done around St Martin's around that, and they said coping with uncertainty, cognitively being able to cope with uncertainty in a very comfortable way of not being around set outcomes was a very strong distinguishing factor of people who'd had a lot of arts education.
Thank you, Emma. So here we've got art for uncertain times. Help us deal with it. Leslie.
Hi. I think that the problems that we're trying to get a grip on are so systemic and complex that we have to really engage in both genealogy and perspicuity. We have to get a really good view of the whole territory. Otherwise, we end up just recycling the whole dualistic ways of thinking between arts and science, subjective, objective. What we need is a much better philosophy of mind and life. This is why Wittgenstein is such an important figure in this respect. His philosophy cuts through some of the nonsense that gets recycled to do with, for example, the quote from Eisner, as though you can actually make judgments independent of rules. This is nonsense. Who can make a judgment independent of a rule? In order to actually not make a judgment, you need to know what the rule is in the first place so that you can break it. But it's this sort of nonsense that art educators often indulge in, and they think they're protecting the species by doing that. But what they're doing, they're making their own arguments less and less kind of attractive to good analytical thinkers who can actually see an alternative way of dealing with that time on Friday afternoon in primary schools, that actually might be a much more worthwhile educational process than a lot of sloppy, self-indulgent thinking about the arts. So I think we've got to get beyond all of some of these most basic, crude ways of thinking philosophically about persons. And then when we clean up our thinking, we've then got to think about how we can actually devise a curriculum that allows children, let's say from 5 to 18 or whatever, before they go to higher education, to get a good grip on meaningful differences in art practices. Wendy is absolutely right. To conflate like ancient prehistoric practices of art with modernity is total nonsense. It's a disgrace, actually, academically, to do that. They're just two different kinds of beasts altogether. And so we've got to get a much better grip on these meaningful differences. For example, nearly all the practices of art that have existed with human beings are ritual practices. They're not there to challenge the existing view of things. They're there to support it. I live in Exeter. Exeter Cathedral wasn't there to go, I'm being subversive, I'm cool. It's there to support a worldview, a Christian understanding of life, and all the visual metaphors in Exeter Cathedral work to that effect brilliantly. But even that, on that very basic level of understanding the difference between ritual practice of art and self-conscious, post-romantic, rebellious, contesting practice of art, most of the PGC students that I interviewed for my course, they didn't even understand that basic difference. None of them had any language by which to make aesthetic judgments about art. And these are people who are believers. They've gone through the process. All the empirical research shows the arts don't actually make people better. They don't improve people's judgment about art. Arland et al.'s study in 2000, massive empirical work on the arts in schools, says that the arts aren't developing judgments. Complex judgments to do with critical insight and contextual understanding. In art education, my own field, people think that if you draw the Aboriginal memorial poles in the British Museum, you're developing judgments about them. You're never going to understand what the function of Aboriginal memorial poles in the British Museum by drawing them and doing pastiches of them, because you don't get that from drawing from them. You don't get that from drawing from Renaissance art. You've got to understand how the art practice is embedded in the background culture. I'll stop there.
Thank you. Susan.
I must be a soft touch because I was very moved in the Ice Age art exhibition. I worry too much about labelling and classifying things. I don't think that creativity belongs to the arts. I think it belongs to everything. But I do work in schools and I do see what's going on. And I do see that children are not going to enjoy school in the next 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years if we do establish this routine and this curriculum. And, you know, if you go to Article 31 of the UN Convention of the Rights of the Child, it is that every child has the right to rest and leisure, to engage in play and recreational activities appropriate to their age, and to participate freely in culture and life and the arts. And if we find that we devalue the arts through our curriculum hierarchy, we're not just going to have a generation of children that don't experience that, we're going to have a generation of teachers, particularly in primary school, that don't have that opportunity for the continued professional development that enables them to understand how to teach effectively the arts and understanding. And it's what I said, I would like to put 2 words back into education. One begins with an F, which is fun. The other begins with a C, which is creativity.
Okay, thank you, Susan. I must say, I've always been baffled by the argument that art makes you better when I think of people like Caravaggio and other people who certainly could not be called moral exemplars. He was done for murder or something.
The nicest would be an even better example. Listening to Mozart and putting people in the gas chambers, that's a good combination.
That's one that often comes up as well. But enough of us, this is now your time. So, any comments or questions? I'll take a group and then we'll come back. So, let me see, who have we got? If we could, I'll take you, then you, then you, then you, and then I'll come back again. So, go over to the lady over by the window. With the long hair, yes.
It's in regards to the art as a modern concept. Surely in the context of the Ice Age art, you could call that art because it's their advancement of understanding. So a flute made out of bone is their version of music. So in the context of the time period, surely that is art to them. So it could be compared to our sort of Mozart, because that was his understanding in the context of the time. So surely comparing them, you have to think of the context surrounding the art, not just saying that's a crude depiction of art.
Okay, thank you. Then it was, yes.
So I realise that, of course, for people here, and for adults interested in ideas in general, that all the conceptual discussions around art are, very important. But I do wonder if trying to push that into every aspect of school education in the arts is really a bit self-indulgent. It's almost like we've got this we've had a long-running crisis of trying to understand what is art, and it's had, and there may be many sort of Dadaist kind of tendencies in our general art culture, which some people think are great, some people think are very problematic. But maybe we'd better to actually separate children from adults. And so children, so my background is as a philosopher, and actually a philosopher of cognitive science, and it does seem that one thing that many of us think today is that you might think it's a bit strange, but not everything is conceptual, right? And our engagement with the world is not purely conceptual. Much of our engagement with the world is practical, and in order to develop the ability to, if you like, the ground for which you can build interesting concepts and form interesting judgments, you have to have some of that capacity to engage with material reality. And of course, the arts give you a primary way of doing that. And so I'm very much in favour of not necessarily just, but orchestral, instrument, tuition, every kind of fine art practice. I think that's things that can really enrich the ground of children's development. And then, of course, some of them will want to develop that conceptually, and that's really important. But if you don't give them that ground, the danger is that you have conceptual discussions which are not grounded in anything quite literally, but also don't make distinctions which are of any interest, really.
Okay, thank you. So if I get you right, you're arguing for the need for children to ground in practice first before doing the conceptual stuff?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Then it was this lady in the purple there.
Oh, right, okay. Yeah, I'll just sort of raise more questions, as Claire said, and welcome address. I was wondering, nobody here is arguing that art is a luxury, and I just wondered, so sort of like everybody's saying it's a necessity, and does that then link it to, it sort of links to the argument, because it has some kind of improving outcome, if it's like a necessity. So I just wonder whether we should say it is a luxury, but it's a luxury, worth having, rather than saying, nobody's going to not survive if they don't do the arts. But we want to move it away from just simply, that kind of necessity. And then the other question I had was, there's this thing about the language. You need to learn the language of art in order to understand, to be able to understand it. And then at the same time, other people are arguing, well, art is a kind of universal language. In fact, it's before language. And, that's why, art is a way of communicating, because you don't really need language to understand it. So I just wondered if people could unpack that a bit there. And then in terms of the Ice Age thing, I also just had a question. I mean, are we saying art is simply, is it just an abstraction, is it an abstract construct of our experiences, in which case, what the woman was saying at the back might be true, because it was like an abstract construct, their abstract construction, or could we talk about the Ice Age as having abstract concepts?
Sorry, 1 minute. If anyone wants to speak, if you put your hand up, I'll take you and then I'll bring you in after in a few minutes. Sorry.
Thanks to all the speakers for those presentations. I found them all extremely interesting in many different ways, but it did occur to me that I'd have to ask the dread question, and the dread question is, what is art? Because I wondered whether we were all talking about different things. My other question is, if we can accept what art is, we'll have to wait for the definitions, when was it not in crisis? And maybe should we just relax about that crisis?
Okay, thank you. Very interesting questions here, panel. I hope you're relishing these. Then I've got the gentleman there in black. And then after him I've got the lady there in green, and the gentleman in blue, and the young man behind. And then down here.
It's navy, not black.
Don't know all aesthetic on me.
Since we're talking about aesthetic judgment, let's get off on the right foot. Some of the speeches and panelists and contributions seem to be on the wrong side of the balance between the sort of subjective and objective, because there's something coming through that art is something that does things to you, ennobles you, enables you to transcend, educates you. But there's another side of art which may be more important, which is what you do. And to think about the question of whether or not it should be compulsory in schools, we have to ask the question not what is art, which is a bit navel-gazing, but when we look at art, in what way is it good in itself? And we can look at a painting or listen to a bit of music and say this is beautiful, and this is true in itself. Some of us will get that and some of us won't. But it's something that we do in terms of our ability to apprehend what's in front of us, rather than what it does to us, which is to make us rather passive in the face of art. And I think when we speak of art as being beautiful or true, we're really using a shorthand for the way in which it is more or less expressive of our human freedom and our subjectivity. And if art is about that, expressing the unique freedom of an artist, it seems to me it can't be made compulsory. Right? That undercuts the very freedom that art expresses. And that would be the problem. I think that would set people off on the wrong foot. I do agree that people should probably have exposure to learning about the rules and the tradition to help them get better at discerning what is beautiful and what is not. That's a matter of learning things at school, which I think education might be fun sometimes, but as long as you learn something, it's doing its job. And there's definitely a room for a certain amount of rigour. But I'll just leave it on that thought. I mean, shouldn't it be something that we do freely, rather than we're made to do? And I get very worried when Tracey Emin was made Professor of Drawing at the Royal Academy, slightly controversial appointment. And one person in defence said at least she could draw as quickly as Picasso. But another person in her defence was Stephen Bailey, the design critic. And he said that he knew that drawing had an ability to reach straight through your consciousness into the brain. And the people who were good at drawing had superior cognitive ability and enhanced hand-to-eye coordination and didn't much enjoy looting. Right? And Tracey Emin made the same argument about the Ebacc. It'll keep the kids off the streets and stop them rioting. It seems a very about time. Art should be an expression of freedom, not a tool to suppress people's expression. It's just, we might want to consider that balance.
Okay, thank you. That's got me worried there. My drawing skills are rubbish. So what does that say about my cognition? Over to...
Well, I wonder what you'd say about autistic sevens who are brilliant drawers. I had been stimulated actually by Wendy's argument about art as a modern concept, art as a modern idea, as being a sort of consciousness of society. I'd already had that thought in my mind, because it then led me on to sort of think about, I had an entirely scientific education at all levels through all the years of my training, and I've never actually had to ever bother to think about the role of education and the role of art in education. But what I've always clung on to is something that Vygotsky said about all the school subjects being capable of nurturing abstract thinking, that they could all contribute in some way to developing in children abstract thinking and how you go about it. And it was in his discussion of language, and that you had to appreciate that language was something separate from speech, and appreciate it as a system, an abstract system, that when you've mastered that system, you could truly manipulate it. And I just wondered whether art isn't like any other subject in the curriculum, that it can actually be capable of nurturing, more abstract thinking in children, which isn't to say that young children shouldn't dabble, but that's a different thing, isn't it, from education, where what you're trying to do is to allow people to actually get mastery of current, abstract forms of thinking and thought as applied to history and as applied to the sort of modern practice of art. And finally, I think the other thing that Vygotsky was very good at was he always said the best way to learn is to actually marry abstract thinking with practical application.
Thank you very much. Now, I've got 4 more people to speak, but before I do, we've got so much on the table, I would like to bring our panel in. We've got them here, so we might as well make use of them. Anyone bursting to start off on responses?
I don't mind, actually.
Okay.
The first question about the differences or similarities between prehistoric practices of art and, let's say, contemporary practices. I think what you were describing is what I would describe, or actually George Steiner would describe, I picked this idea from him, as creativity by omission. And it's involuntary omission in this case, because if you're living in a prehistoric culture, all that you might have is a bit of bone to make a choice to make a carving. Yeah? So this is a good example of creativity by what I call involuntary omission. You don't have a choice. You can't find bits of marble and you don't have the sophisticated tools, or do you see what I mean? Yeah? Now but the basis of that practice isn't just twiddling around. The arts had a deep anthropological purpose. It often would probably have to do with representing and sharing a deep, profound, symbolic, ritualistic view of life, which is very different to the practices now. Most practices now are out to subvert any particular received notion of a sacred or a ritualistic practice of life. It's actually become like a kind of cliche of contemporary art. It's that kind of knee-jerk way of thinking about art. And that's, I think, what Wendy was probably, I shouldn't be speaking to Wendy, but I think that's what Wendy was saying. The way that exhibition was curated gave people a wrong understanding of the differences in these practices. That's why I actually said that we've got to teach people how to get a grip on meaningful differences in different forms and practices of art. If we don't do that, we're failing to give them the master key for unlocking all of these different practices of art. That's why I actually said that the students who came to me to be interviewed for my course, all of them still thought that art was about self-expression, which is nuts, because that notion only emerged around 1800. But you see how they've actually been socialised in a form of cultural deprivation, which isn't uncommon in visual art. It's a disgrace, actually, what's going on often in visual art, right? Especially in higher education. The idea that these people be coming to me with this kind of nonsensical understanding of art is symptomatic of something that's deeply wrong in the way things are done.
Okay, thank you, Leslie. Who'd like to go next? Yeah, Anna?
I mean, there was tons and tons said there, so it's quite hard to respond to. I mean, I'm going to. So one aspect in terms of the idea of art being educative, I think I sort of misconstrued my point. Art doesn't do stuff to you. It's your response to it that is key. It is entirely your responsibility to kind of respond to it, to reflect on it, and to draw lessons from it, and to engage with it. And that's a slightly different way of learning rather than being educated by something, by an object or something else. So that kind of taking responsibility to learn and reflect on something is something that arts, engaging with arts in terms of looking at it is kind of very key. And I'm glad Vygotsky was brought up as well. And that was something that really influenced my thinking when I was training in art at Goldsmiths, actually, which it wasn't fashionable at the time, those ideas, but that idea that practice has a relationship with abstract thought and jumping between the two, because practice is everything in art, and in art education it is very, very core. So I think as we're talking about it slightly one step back because we're on a panel, I was certainly making the assumption that primarily that kind of making and contributing creatively to the world is kind of what comes through. So, and it's so innate in children that, for example, when they're learning to first write, they don't write letters, they draw letters. So an A is a circle and a stick. And so that kind of visual way of understanding the world is, and sort of artistic way of understanding the world, is something that's quite innate. I personally don't hold to the view that art is universally understood. I think that when you're creating for a small community, you can all innately get it because you're kind of coming from the same place. But one of the core aspects of why I don't believe that art is universal, for example, is that things are so time-specific, culturally specific, and born at a particular moment. That's why the kind of understanding of that, and trying to draw lessons from it and understanding it, is the responsibility of the viewer, as well as the people presenting it. And I like the what is art question because it's a real whatter. And you know, a definition of it, to my mind, and that's just coming from my direction on things, is that it's something that's been created for the purpose of being reflected upon, because there's a public aspect to art, this idea that you create it, whichever way, exploratory and creatively, however you get there, and then it gets presented to be reflected upon by the audience, and that would happen with ritual art, and certainly with subversive work, it's much more explicit, that kind of thing, because partly some of the things that happened in between was you had a lot of brilliant rational thought coming in and really informing how you could start to judge things aesthetically. For me, the reason for arguing art should be in schools and not just something that happens anyway, is if you make something compulsory, you are demonstrating that you value it. And because this is a core part of human experience and life and what we create and make together, it should be up there with all the other kind of core subjects, so that it's on a level, so that students in their own mind can jump between these disciplines and understand how these things do have an equal and important relationship to each other and can feed into each other, even though they're quite discipline specific.
Okay, thank you. That's got quite an interesting contrast there on the question of whether it should be made compulsory to your question you raised. You know, would it be restricting freedom to make it compulsory, or would it be a validation? So you might want to just have a think about that, but I'll bring in Wendy, then Susan. Do you want to say? Yes, please. I was going to take Wendy and then yes.
So, yeah, I mean, I think the issue of making art compulsory in schools is an interesting one. Because I guess I don't think it should be, let me think. I guess I don't think it should be government imposed, because I don't think the government can tell people to do things well. And ideally art education deserves to be done well, so it should only be done if you're going to do it well. But I think any school that wants to claim itself as being a good school and providing a good education should consider art as core to what they provide to children. So I guess that's the distinction I'd make. And I think there's a complexity in talking about arts education that kind of is different from talking about arts and education. So it's the way they come together kind of creates an extra complexity, because I think education in schools is about child development up to a point. So it is about developing children's ability to think in different ways, abstract thinking skills and that kind of thing. And art can no doubt contribute to that. At the same time, I think one of the things that's happened in the history of art education is the way it's kind of been subsumed by that child development demand. So that in a way all it claims to do is, sort of like develop children's creativity, their sense of fun, it gives them a relief from the rest of education. And I think that underplays how important art is. And I think one of the reasons why we struggle to defend art education today is because it's got this kind of idea of it's fun, and that it's sort of and it's about creativity. And that kind of fun, that creativity, as we all know, is not just in the arts. You can be a very creative scientist. So, that saying that it's creative doesn't justify it. Saying it's fun, hardly justify. I mean, education, is preparing people for their future, which is a serious business. So I think it's about trying to grab hold of this idea of the importance of art in society being why children should be taught it. And the side effects of that might be that they get developed, in an area of abstract thinking, they get better abstract thinking. The side effects of it might be that they get a better job, all of that kind of thing. But that actually is not the reason why you do it, because the reason why you do it is because art is such an important part of our world, such an important part of how we engage with our world and understand it and appreciate it. I will read you, if you don't mind, I'll just read you the Suzanne Langer quote. Because I think it kind of... Suzanne Langer is a philosopher of the arts in the 20th century. And she says, art is the objectification of feeling, and in developing our intuition, teaching eye and ear to perceive expressive form, it makes form expressive for us wherever we confront it, in actuality as well as in art. So basically she's saying art makes us look at the world differently. And that's why it's important. It's about our engagement with our world. And so it might develop abstract thinking, but that's not why we teach it. It might make us good for jobs, but that's not why we teach it. We teach it because art is important. And I think we need to find a way of grabbing that back and, making schools understand that.
Okay, thank you, Wendy.
Oh, my head's spinning. If I went to what is art, that's another debate and another day. But I would mention that we've spent something like 15 months arguing with the Department for Education that it isn't an art curriculum, it's an art, craft and design curriculum, which I think opens up the definition far more wider. I actually don't think there's anything wrong with having fun in schools or fun in life. I don't agree that the education system that's proposed in this country is preparing children for the future. The child that entered reception class at school this year, 40% of those children will work in jobs and professions that haven't been invented yet. So in fact, by developing that understanding of the abstract principles, which are very transferable across the whole of the curriculum, we will in fact encourage children to face up to life in the 21st century, which is not going to be the same as it was 2 years ago, never mind 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And Mr. Navy, I agree that children should just get down and get with it and enjoy it, but understand the significance of art. But if we don't have the arts in schools, I want you to put yourself in the mind of a child getting up in the morning. I mean, children are tested from the age of 3. Ofsted visit childminders, for goodness sake.
That's just a quick question, yeah. Because I may be terribly old-fashioned wearing navy, but I thought education was about teaching children about the past, not preparing them for the future.
So can we let the speaker finish and then can you wait till... it's your turn, which you'll get in a minute.
I probably would not agree with that statement because I think we're in a different world now. I think this is Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, but what we are preparing children for is not what we were preparing children for in the past, which was much more predictable.
Okay, thank you.
Just
Yes,
respond to a couple of the questions.
Yes.
Just want to speak briefly about the definition of art question. I think if you look at the philosophic aesthetics, that just runs into the ground, that particular way forward. Like, how do you define art? It's hopeless. That's why I actually tried to raise the issue of analogies with persons. Art's more like people. People come in different shapes, sizes, with different dispositions. Some people are awful and corrupt, like some art. Some people are beautiful and wonderful and virtuous, like really great art. Right? That's why these analogies are important. And I think what we've got to get back to is what kind of personhood do we want to inhabit, or want our children to inhabit in the future? Do we want them to be kind of like capable of flourishing, or do we want them to have like stunted futures? This is why education matters, because it's like a passport to the future.
Okay, sorry Leslie, we've got quite a few hands,
Sure.
so I want to give the audience a chance. I have here from previously the gentleman in the blue jumper, followed by the young gentleman behind, followed by the lady here, and any other hands? Okay, yep, I've got you.
Right, thank you. I would like to talk more about the practical side within school. I was head of mathematics, but I played several instruments, so ran 3 groups. And the interest in music, or any subject, is somehow dented when every teacher in the school is labelled in the kids' minds as Mr. Numbers, Mr. Something else. And you almost become a person when you can, in fact, engage in other parts of the curriculum. And it also gives children an opportunity to see that it's not just for art teachers, it is something that we can all be involved in. In dealing with children, I've found that when someone has worked hard and achieved, and in this case it might be music, but it could apply all over the place, and achieved something, their self-esteem rises enormously. And that is a very valuable, and their confidence, and that's very extremely valuable. And also, if you're asking for help in to do something, who does it? The people who are already engaged in those things, almost full time. The people who do not engage in these things, these extra things, have never got the time. And I think really, we've got to, as teachers, really broaden what we do, so that it's seen to be something that's human, not just done in that corner over there. Secondly, as a Rotarian, we do in fact run a Young Musician of the Year in our town. And I was very disappointed in going around to the primary schools to find that over half of them had nobody with any interest or any capability in the member of staff in music. So it's all right having these ideas of what should be done, but if the mechanism for doing it isn't there, it's a non-starter.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully we can hope to contribute to where we will be able to train people and educate people to be able to provide something worthwhile. After you, I've got the young man in grey, yeah. You, and then, sorry, the 2 young men in grey, yes.
I wanted to say quickly that I don't think personally that we can really learn to fully develop our critical faculties and our understanding really of our culture through the ages and from a historical perspective, which I think we talked a bit about, without, similar to what this chap here said, about having a grounding first in practical skills. And I think there's a lot that can be learnt. I mean, I come from a music background, and I think that there's been a huge amount of learnings that we've had, which have been through practical skills. I mean, you take something like, in the last 40 years, we've had the development of historically informed performance, and practices like that, which is something which has been learned specifically through practical skills, rather than purely at a distance. And I think that really, I mean, Emma talked a bit about how with the arts, what we're doing is ultimately a personal thing, and we have to make those connections for ourselves whenever we engage with any piece of art. And I think to really do that successfully, a grounding in the appropriate skills is always going to help with that. Also, just quickly, we had people started debating about whether whether we're teaching about the past or preparing kids for the future. And I also think that those things aren't necessarily mutually exclusive. I mean, it would be a very worrying state of affairs if we weren't teaching about the past, because we can only get rid of our history and our cultural history once. You couldn't gain that back, and if we're only preparing people for the present, well, I don't think they can be fully prepared about and understanding how we've got there.
Okay, thank you. I just want to say thank you very much for your patience, but we are getting towards the end of the session. I've got about 5 people, so if you could keep your points and questions brief, please.
Okay, as briefly as I can, I'm speaking tomorrow on public art, and I think what is art will become the focus of pretty much every debate we have here. It'll be a total futile exercise, and all the artists I know spend their time creating art and don't really worry too much about what is art, so I think we don't should spend too much time on it. I do think the panel kind of set up a hierarchy of art about. I'm relatively relaxed about whether art's part of the curriculum or not part of the curriculum. I left art school and joined a band. I was never trained to be in a band when I went to school, but it's still a perfectly valid art form, and I think the arts will get on with themselves pretty much without that help. On the issue of primitivism, I think panel, I disagree with you on that. I think you're right, art and the arts is a modern concept. The essence of the arts, the essence of art is absolutely fundamental to human existence, and that's why Picasso and Matisse saw something in primitive art, so I think we'd be careful with dismissing that. And just in terms of what I gained from going to art school, and why I do think actually the arts are valuable, is I was faced with a blank canvas, or when I was writing songs I was faced with nothing, and I had to create something from nothing, and there's something that having to do that, there's something that's valuable in developing people.
Okay, thank you. I've got lady here.
Thanks. I sympathise, Sue, with your desire to have fun and creativity in education. I think we all want fun and creativity in life generally, but I'm not sure if I'm understanding this. I thought it was fascinating, everybody's things from the panel. I'm just trying to clarify this from my mind. It seems to me that you're talking about having creative education, teaching people creativity in schools. And what Wendy and other people are talking about is more about teaching people to appreciate, if we're talking about visual art, or appreciate art in schools. And I think that's something that's worth doing, but I'm scared about the idea of trying to teach creativity, and I think that today, when the state is so keen to measure and check and approve and employs armies of managers to assess what people are doing in hospitals and in the education system, it's a nightmare to think about letting them get their grubby fingers on judging how creative students are. When I remember when I was at school, the acres of clay ashtrays that people made in art class, or the reams and reams of copied photographs, drawn copies photographs of pop stars, I kind of think that what would be more useful now is teaching people what is good art and what is bad art, and it's impossible. Let kids get out of school and be creative somewhere else, but education, that's the fun and creative bit is what they do anyway, and letting the state have anything to do with it, I think you're making a mistake to think it would ever have a positive outcome.
Okay, thank you. We are running very short, so please brief. Gentleman in purple there. I'm not an artist, clearly.
Actually, obviously, like everyone else, I think the discussion has been very fascinating. I work in the cultural sector, but I am not an artist. I work at the British Library, and just listening to both Wendy and also to Leslie, I was actually struck by a number of things. But But one thing in particular was the idea, that art is not here to make us better, in terms of making us more, let's say, moral people. And I think myself, doesn't that fly in the face of certainly what the ancient Greeks and Romans, the Renaissance and the Enlightenment all thought about, one of the purposes of art, which was mainly, to, as someone said, to soothe the savage beast within us, but also, to lift us up above the level of, let's say, beast, to appreciate the world around us, and obviously, to, if you like, enhance our interaction with the, let's say, world and stuff. I'll just finish by saying that I'm also wondering, though, if we are trying to load up young people with the whole of the Western artistic canon from year 6, or are we trying to give them a spark of artistic, aesthetic curiosity. I still hold to the idea from our Bill, Shakespeare, that man is a wondrous piece of let's say, work and stuff. But obviously, you have to know as to the basic materials to work with.
Okay, thank you. We are really on the last bits. It's a brief, please. I've got the lady there with the leopard print scarf, and then the gentleman behind her. Really quick, please, because I'm going to have fun.
Okay, so my question was about the kind of idea of Oscar Wilde and the art for art's sake kind of thing, and the necessity as well. But without art in education, surely things like business and politics, which are obviously really related to things like drama or, for example, graphic designers in like business, then how can education actually grow, and how can business and politics and things like that grow? Because they're all influenced by these art forms.
Okay, thank you. Nice and succinct. Gentleman behind.
Very quickly, one thing that wasn't addressed, I felt, but I think is so prevalent within arts education and cultural workers in education, is using arts for instruction, and there's a kind of morality that's kind of underpinning a lot of that, and that's not really kind of being addressed, usually to try and change the world in a sort of skewed way. But art, so Bob and Roberta Smith, for example, would say art makes children powerful. The seminal Sloganeering artist. What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, I've seen some hand up, but going to have to stop now. I want to bring in our panel of speakers for brief final comments to anything that's been out there, which is an awful lot. So perhaps we'll go in reverse order. Susan?
Yeah, it's difficult because there's so many questions, but the one thing I would like to say is that there are some children whose only exposure to the arts will come through school. It will not happen in the home environment, and we only have to look at the work of kids' arts and kids' organisations like that to see that. And I have seen the most powerful, moving in children's learning, kids from really difficult backgrounds through the arts, and I don't think it would happen if they didn't have that in school.
Thank you, Susan.
Okay. Trying very quickly to try to hoover up some other questions that were given adequate coverage, actually. There's somebody at the back who talked about the importance of practical learning over against conceptual learning. I come from a working class background. When I played football, we also talked about football. And we also talked about our heroes in football, the context. Yeah? So I think this is a false dichotomy again. It's part of the sickness of the time. Yeah? Our discourse and our practices, quote Wittgenstein, it's practice that gives words their sense. It doesn't say practice is in a different universe to words. They belong together. And they always will. Secondly, there's still people still perpetuating individual expression from cultural living. Vygotskian pedagogy gets beyond that. It's all about mediated learning, scaffolding the learning. Yeah? Wittgenstein's philosophy of mind is a social view of mind. So we've got to get beyond this individual little expressive beast over against cultural norms, cultural expectations. It's not like that. And the third thing, people have again been dichotomizing forms of knowledge. I think you, the music chart, that's why in my talk I said you need two forms of knowledge: procedural knowledge, know-how, and declarative knowledge, know that. and you shouldn't muddle them up. You don't get good at understanding Bach's St. Matthew Passion and what it meant in the culture of Lutheran Christianity by just playing your oboe, do you? So we need to be clear about what we're about, otherwise we'll get sidetracked into all sorts of cancers of the mind.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I can't take you now, but there's plenty more time throughout today and tomorrow.
I think it's come through quite clearly that there is some consistency of agreement, or maybe I'm just being very partial in what I'm hearing, about making being very primary to arts, crafts, design, music, everything, and also the appreciation side is something that we're talking about needs bolstering up, essentially, and thinking through perhaps a bit more sort of strategically. But both of those things are really, really vital. I think creativity and curiosity are really core things across all human knowledge. But the thing about visual art, the thing about the arts generally, I know visual art's best, but the arts generally, is that playfulness that's been called fun. Actually, I think there is a risk sometimes that people conflate fun with a lightness and a not seriousness, but there is an aspect of play and humour and all these things that actually can be very insightful, and that loosening up and throwing around of ideas can actually be a very, very valuable thing to do as well. So a bit in the way that people sometimes have an attitude that drives me crazy when they say art's a luxury, this idea that it's sort of a nice cherry on the top of the cake should you want it, rather than actually part of the mix. Happens quite a lot to humour and playfulness and fun as well, which is, no, this is part of the mix. It's incredibly valuable. It's an important way to kind of explore ideas, throw ideas around back and forth. Wittgenstein was really good on humour. You know, as he would say, the joy of a joke is that you, when people don't have a sense of humour, they're not creative, for example, it's like you throw them a ball, expecting them to throw it back, and they don't. They sort of put it in their pocket. So this kind of playfulness and humour, it's got the same kind of problem that the arts has in terms of being not taken seriously. But I think it's so serious, and it's such a core part of life, it's very valuable. And to my mind, the kind of, what does art do, can it change things, point a little bit. One of the aspects, particularly around schools, I would say, is getting people very confident about understanding and motivated and excited about making a contribution. You sort of do your bit.
Thank you, Emma. Wendy.
Okay, yeah, been a fantastic discussion and lots of things to continue agreeing and disagreeing with. I just wanted to finish on maybe saying that I'm with Hannah Arendt, the German-American philosopher, who said that education is a conservative process. It is about giving children, young people, a knowledge of the past, a knowledge of their heritage, because that then equips them to go and make what they will of the world. It doesn't guarantee anything, but it equips them with the tools and the knowledge and the abilities and the interest and the curiosity and the ambition and the dynamism to go and make something of themselves in the world and make something of the world. And I think that's why arts education has to be part of it, whether it's however it's introduced into schools, it's done in schools, it has to be part of a good education.
Thank you so much. I know, just hold your applause for a second, I know there'll be a lot of you with questions and burning things that you felt haven't been addressed or could have been addressed further and in more depth. Just to point out, that is, if that's how you're feeling right now, then that's great, because the whole point of the discussion is to stimulate rather than end debate. We've got the whole education strand today, which Toby talked about at the beginning. We've also got an arts-specific strand on arts that Wendy's convening tomorrow. Those of you that are in London have got the Barbican any time, so do come and make most of it. And Wittgenstein, probably on the Penguin Classics next to Morrissey, I'd say. But can we thank our